and cruel way? Oh, you can? Oh, good. All right. Well, that's traditional values being upheld. Right. Well, anyway, very nice to join you. I just want to say a couple of words by way of introduction. What will I do as Deputy Leader if I'm elected? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is champion a straightforward kind of politics. Listening, being straight, telling it like it is. Why? Because it's the only way we're going to overcome the cynicism that will otherwise destroy our politics. Secondly, we've got to unite the party. I've never been part of a faction. I will support Gordon Brown 100%, but when I need to tell him something that you feel strongly about, or others do, I'll do that. That's part of the job. The third thing that we've got to do is to have a voice for the grassroots, including on policy, because party members, in my experience, and I've talked to a lot, as part of this campaign and before, want to feel included. They want to be part of the process of discussing and debating policy. And I would see the job as being about ensuring that that took place, because if people feel included and inspired, they're more likely to get out on the streets, we're more likely to have Labour activity in local communities. When people see Labour politics helping them to deal with their problems, realising their hopes and aspirations for a better future, politics ceases to become remote, distant, alienating, engenders cynicism. Politics becomes practical, purposeful, rooted in the community. That's the way that we win elections. Final thing is that our values matter to me just as much as our policies. Indeed, our values have to shape our policies. And what I think all of us want is a party that continues to take forward the fight for social justice. In my constituency, the biggest single issue is the gap between rich and poor, despite the progress that we've made as a government. Fighting poverty here, fighting poverty abroad. I want a society in which we actually celebrate the contribution that people make, whether it's in business, trade unions, community organisations, whatever, public service. People who do things are to be prized, because the third thing I want is a democracy in which we ask people, would you please give something back, as well as asking things of others. It goes back to my comment about cynicism. If people think that politics is about, excuse my language, sitting on your backside and expecting somebody else to do something, that's not how we transformed ourselves as a society. That's not how we're going to deal with the big issues of the future, tackling climate change, building enough affordable houses, keeping the economy successful, ensuring that people have got the skills that they need, dealing with antisocial behaviour, building strong, stable communities in which people say hello to each other in the morning. Because that's how you make progress in society. A world in which we put justice at the heart of our foreign policy. And the last thing we want, indeed it's the first thing we want, is a Labour government still in office, redistributing wealth, power and opportunity, because that is how we're going to change the communities in which we live, the country of which we're proud, and the world of which we're part. So, that was me just to sort of kick off, but I'm sure you've got things that you want to raise, questions you want to put, comments you want to make. Who's going to be first?
You talked about the importance of inspiring people about politics, I guess. How do you actually propose to do that?
Well, by showing people that politics makes a difference. Take the thing that I've been working on for the last 3.5 years, which is Britain's contribution to the fight against global poverty. What was the Make Poverty History campaign? What is it, if not an inspiration? These are people who've come out, campaigned, lobbied, sent postcards, letters, marched, because they believe, one, it's possible to change things, and they said to us as politicians, and we gave them support and encouragement, and Britain under a Labour government has provided extraordinary leadership in the fight against global poverty, and they turned up at Gleneagles and said, come on you lot, you know this needs to happen, you can do it, now come on, make it happen. And that was a great support to Gordon, the Prime Minister, myself and others, as we worked to get the debt cancellation deal. And now you can say to people 2 years later, right, you wanted debt cancellation, we wanted it, we fought for it. 22 of the world's poorest countries, every single penny in debt they owed when you marched in Gleneagles has been written off. Zambia has introduced free healthcare as a result of it. Politics never changes anything? I don't think so. Politics really does change things. That's at one level. Come back down to communities. Antisocial behaviour, fear of crime, big issue in my constituency in Leeds. Now, a government that listens, as we've done, provides support to communities to actually call people to account for making other people's lives a misery, and that includes antisocial behaviour orders, and that's had a real impact in my constituency. More community policing, but because we've got values, it's not just about penalising people, making them aware of their responsibilities. It's also about encouragement and support. Sure Start programme, fabulous. I'd like to extend Sure Start up the age range, so as those young people who benefited from it, from just after they're born to the age of 3, what about supporting them as they grow up with a Sure Start for older children? So it's examples like that, and the things we're proud of: minimum wage, tax credits, devolution, the Human Rights Act, increase in child benefit. They did not fall out of the sky one morning. They happened because of politics, and we have to support people in seeing investment in the NHS, the new buildings, the shorter waiting time, the transformation we're going to have achieved by next year with a maximum 18-week wait from the beginning to the end of the process. It was a dream 10 years ago. Now, we're not going to win next time by making people grateful for all of those things, but you can say, hey folks, look what we did with our politics. Now, would you like some more of it? And can we sit down and talk about the challenges of the future? That's the way I do it. What would you do? You asked the question.
Well, I don't know. I'm going that's all part of the wider picture of politics. What I really want to know is, say you're sitting there as deputy leader, the phone rings and someone says, quick, help us, Newcastle under Lyme constituency needs reinvigorating.
Okay. Well, I'm not standing to be the chair of the Labour Party. Now, I think Labour Party members ought to be able to elect their own chair, either through conference or through the National Policy Forum. Because this job is about working with the chair of the party to support parties. It is about the money that we can raise, and we've got to sort out our financing, and that's why trying to get an agreement on funding of political parties with a bit more state support but keeping the trade union link is so important. It's about targeting our resources particularly on the most marginal seats, but not forgetting our heartlands, because I represent a heartland seat and we've got to make sure that people are motivated to come out and vote. I think when we do get people into the party, we've got to make sure that the experience is enjoyable, which is why I say we joined the party to change the world and not to change the minutes of the previous meeting. Please, please, could we not sap our energy and vitality with a lot of process? People are interested in doing things, and we should not be afraid of getting out there and doing things. Some parties have said, well, we won't just talk about improving your environment, we'll participate in a Saturday. They put on Labour jackets and they go around and they pick up the rubbish. Now, people see that and say, yeah, they don't just talk, they're part of doing. And then you can work with others to get communities to take responsibility for things in those circumstances. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I see an absolute connection between our politics and our organisation. Because the job of deputy leader for me, and I take a different view from some of the candidates, it's not just about being the chair of the party. You're also going to be the deputy to the Prime Minister in Parliament. You're going to be deputising for the Prime Minister internationally. You've got to be, if you're going to be a voice for the grassroots on politics and policy, you've got to be at the centre of the government, participating in those big decisions and debates. Final thing I'd say is that party wants a chance to be included, and I think we've got to give a commitment that as we come to deal with the big policy questions of the future, we'll sit down and talk to the party about them, listen to each other, hear views. Not because in the end members think they can get into a corner, have a vote and send a message to Gordon, we've decided you're going to do the following things, please vote. Because politics is more complex and difficult, governments have to take decisions sometimes. But people want the chance to have been part of a discussion, to be heard, to be listened to be debated with, sometimes argued with. Because then we feel better about the process and the involvement, and we can take greater pride in what comes out the other end. Okay? Who's next?
Can I ask a question, Hilary?
Sure.
A couple of the other candidates have said that they might separate out the role of deputy leader from any other cabinet position and not commit themselves to as much other work and focus as a full-time deputy leader of the party. Do you think that you'd make a similar commitment?
No, because I see the job in a different way. They're arguing that in effect the party chair and the deputy leader post should be combined. I'm saying that we should have a party chair and a deputy leader, a party chair elected by the members. One, because there's more than enough work to be getting on with, and part of the deputy leader's job would be to work with the party chair. But two, if you want a voice that's going to influence policy, then I do see the job as having a responsibility in government as well as having a responsibility to help renew the party. So I see the job in a different way. You look back in history and that is what a deputy leader has done. So I see it in those broader terms, and I see it in different terms to those, I mean, Hazel Blears in particular and John Cruddas, yes, in effect saying this is just the party chair. I don't mean just in the sense it's not important, it's hugely important, but I see the job in broader terms than that, because my argument is it's the politics and the organisation that have to come together, because it's the politics that actually will help us to inspire people to get stuck in, give us more resources on the ground, more people prepared to campaign. So I see it in a different way to them. What's your view, since you asked the question?
I think it's important for the deputy leader to be, if you like, the campaigner-in-chief of the party, and that, to me, is what I'd like the deputy leader to really focus on, is getting out, actually speaking to people on the doorstep and being very, very visible figurehead within the party.
Okay. Well, that is certainly a very important part of the job. Okay, who's next?
You talk about uniting the party, but what about on, like, you talk about bringing, like, sort of credibility back to politics? It's about uniting. What about uniting Parliament around certain issues, also on the national level, but the supranational level, about things on climate change? How do you proceed to sort of do those sort of things?
Well, we've got to show discipline and unity as a party. I think the reason I put such an emphasis on reaching out to people, talking, listening to each other as we debate policy, both with the party and with the Parliamentary Labour Party, it's a point I made to the PLP on Monday night, then you're less likely to get people saying, well, I don't like that policy and I'm going to vote against it, or whatever. People just want to feel included and have the chance to influence what's going on. I mean, on climate change, since you raised it, this is one of the great challenges that we face. I see that myself in my job as International Development Secretary. Biggest impact on the poorest countries of the world, least responsible for causing the problem. And when it stops raining in places, or it rains too much and sea levels rise, human beings will not stay either to die of thirst or to drown. They're going to be moving house, and they might be coming to live near us. So, when people say, well, yeah, I'm sorry about poverty in the rest of the world, but we can't do anything about it, actually it isn't our responsibility, we know we're living in a world now where all of us are connected. And what happens somewhere else is eventually going to come and impact upon those of us who live here. So we can't close the door on the rest of the world. And I think the big political choice of our age will be the argument between those who say we've got to be open to each other, we've got to work together, we've got to embrace multilateralism, we've got to shape globalisation in the interest of fighting poverty and injustice, as opposed to the choice of the people who say, let's just close in on ourselves, shut the door, close the curtains, hope the rest of the world will go away, let's fall prey to narrow nationalism. And in their own way, that's what the Nats and the BNP are about. You see it in Le Pen in France and other movements. I think there's only one choice that we can make, and by definition, climate change cannot be dealt with by any one nation. If we stopped all our CO2 emissions, in 45 minutes time at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, in 2 years China would have replaced them by its economic development. So we absolutely have to be in this together, and that's why the fight that we're leading in the world for a new global agreement that includes China, India and the developing world, as well as the Americans, I'm afraid who haven't quite got it yet as far as the administration is concerned, is so important.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Hilary. You said earlier that as a party we should be trying to change the world and not to change the minutes.
Yeah.
One of the problems that we have in Newcastle now is that the red tape of party rules over candidate selection for local elections, things like that, are preventing us from actually being able to campaign. I mean, what would you propose as a deputy leader to sort of find a way of making being actually being more involved without having to worry about the red tape stopping them?
Yeah. Well, as far as candidate selection is concerned, you've got to have a process to ensure that it's fair to everybody. If we're going to win back all those council seats, parliamentary seats that we lost in 2005, then we've got to pick candidates early, so there's men and women representing all parts of our community. We need more women candidates, we need more black and ethnic minority candidates standing in those elections, can get out, get stuck into the community, show their face, show that Labour politics is interested in what people are concerned about. That's the first thing. Second thing is the process of party meetings. I've seen good people come to meetings, have a look around and say, people seem more interested in process than they are in politics, not quite sure this is how I want to spend my life. I think we've got to provide a variety of ways for people to get stuck in. People have different amounts of time and energy to commit. Some are happy just to support, to vote, to give money, to come out and do practical things. Some will commit to being delegates and come to meetings. We need more chance to sit and talk about politics so that we keep the process to a minimum. People shouldn't see changes to the way in which we operate as constituency parties as somehow a conspiracy to take politics out of what we do. On the contrary, it's a way of injecting more politics into what we do, building better connections with the National Policy Forum, because I'm a very strong supporter of it. It's a better way of making policy, but we have lots of party members, frankly, haven't got a clue who their rep is on the National Policy Forum. Some practical ideas. I'd like every constituency party to be able to put a statement to party conference every year, which could be published so people could see what we are thinking, because they're not all going to get time to be debated. Another thing is when we put submissions into the National Policy Forum, again publish them on the web so people can have a look. Another idea is, if you believe in reaching out, we could say to constituencies, look, when government has to decide on new policy, there's an obligation now to consult, and we do it all the time. If you're putting a submission in on a policy area, we could say, look, if you demonstrate that you've consulted with some people in your local community, then we might look at those first, give some priority considering those as opposed to other submissions that we get. So that would be an incentive, an encouragement to people to get stuck into their community. So those are some really practical ideas about ways in which we can improve participation. What are your ideas, since you asked the question?
I don't honestly know. That's one of the problems that I find with the Labour Party is that we are, particularly in Newcastle, we have elections every year. We're so hampered by the rules that by the time we sorted the rules out, we've lost 6 months campaigning time and then we lose more seats. I mean, going on what you say about consultation, I get very frustrated when the first thing I hear about a new government policy that's coming from a Labour government, when I read it on the front page of the paper, is how come the journalists get to know what my party's doing before I do? And that's, so I mean, I don't know what the solution is, but hopefully one of the candidates for the leadership election will find that winning formula.
Yeah, I mean, your point about where we first learn of things is a really important one, because there's, you know, a lot of policy should be able to evolve from discussion. And actually, you look back in time, well, a lot of the things that we've done as a government have indeed evolved from the efforts of the party in the past. You go back to find that first conference resolution in favour of a minimum wage, arguing for more childcare, calling for devolution, calling for a Human Rights Act. I mean, the things that we've done have come from the party and the movement originally, and helping people to see that connection over time is important. A practical point about Parliament, I mean, one thing I would do if it was down to me is, if we're announcing new policy, and sometimes governments have to respond very quickly to things that are going on, I'd get up and tell no one beforehand and just announce it to Parliament, because the journalists would then say, oh, you didn't let us know about that before, and I'd say, yes, we didn't. We take Parliament seriously, we believe in it, you want to find out what's going on, you come and watch what's happening in Parliament. Simple change, big cultural difference. It would unfortunately make life very difficult for the Today programme. So we'd have to discuss that with John Humphreys and Jim Naughtie and Carolyn Quinn and the rest of the team. Who's next?
Judy?
Can I just ask, if you want to be candid, how effective do you think negative campaigning can be?
How effective do I think negative campaigning?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I'm not interested in it and I don't practice it. And I never have. I've said to the team right from the beginning, we talk about straightforward politics, that's what we're going to do. And I'm just simply not interested in that. People do what people do. In the end, that's politics. My grandfather, who was he started life as a Liberal and became a Labour MP, he had an old saying. He said, never wrestle with a chimney sweep. In other words, if you do that, you're going to end up getting covered in dirt just like them. In other words, don't get down in the gutter with people. I'm a great believer in being straightforward, treating people with respect, saying what you think, listening to the argument, being persuaded or not, and in the end, you make the choice, you make the judgment. And I try and practice what I talk about.
If I can just ask another question, Hilary. In Stoke-on-Trent, the BNP seems to be having quite a moderate electoral success in wards that would typically be Labour wards. I just wondered why you think that.
Oh.
Are working crossing the box next to the BNP?
Yeah. It's a very, very good question. I have the same problem in my constituency. In a couple of my wards, the BNP polled very heavily in the local elections we've just had. Why do people do that? I think for a number of reasons. I think because people feel alienated from politics. They feel that the political process doesn't impact upon their lives, although it does, because the minimum wage and the tax credits and so on have come as a result of politics, and I think helping people to see that is really important. The improvement in facilities. I think secondly, people feel quite ambivalent about the impact of globalisation and the movement of people around the world. We know that it's foreign workers who are in the fields of East Anglia picking vegetables now that will buy at the supermarket at the weekend. We know that globalisation means you can go into Primark in the centre of Leeds, in the head row, buy a pair of jeans for £4. For my constituents on low incomes, this is very, very good, because they haven't got a lot of money to spend. But when people see their communities changing very, very fast, they're not entirely sure they feel comfortable, and it doesn't make everyone a racist who feels uncomfortable about it. And there's an issue here. And believe you me, my constituents, those people in Stoke, are talking about it. We have to talk about it and acknowledge it. How do we deal with it? One, in the end, it's about fairness. If people think the system is unfair, then that adds to the problem. So showing that that there is a common entitlement for people based on need is the first thing that we have to do. The second thing on housing, because it's an increasingly important issue, is build more houses. That's the fundamental problem, because you've got people who just don't know whether their kids will be able to get a council property near where they've been born and brought up. Parents who are owner-occupiers who wonder how on earth are our kids going to be able to afford to buy somewhere. Same issue. And the third thing is just to be resolute in taking on the BNP and their ideology that somehow there's this great difference between us because some of us speak a different language, have a different colour skin. There isn't. Inside, there is a common humanity. And you make those connections, you enable people to learn to live alongside one another, to get to know each other, and then gradually those things fade. So it's overcoming fear and alienation and getting stuck into those communities so that people can see politics as a way of dealing with the housing problem, dealing with the concerns that they've got. You've got to start from where people are and show them how we can help.
If I could just follow up on that.
Of course you can.
It was the honest phenomenon in Stoke-on-Trent is that only 3% of the population is from a BME part of the community. In wards where the BNP do have their success, it's even lower than that. This seems the strangest thing. And I have to be quite frank, I think one of the reasons that BNP are being successful is partially down to the quality of our candidates in those wards. How do you think we can improve the quality of our candidature?
Well, we should pick the best people. We should pick the best people for the job, and that going back to your earlier point about making sure that the party process enables to do that and to put people in post in time. Because in the end, the electorate will suss out who's doing the work, who isn't, who's good, who's responsive, who takes up issues, who doesn't, who's listening, who's out there talking, and will make a judgment accordingly in those circumstances. So it's secondly, of course, you're right. The BNP is at its strongest in the largely all-white areas. The one seat they've got in Leeds is in Morley, almost entirely white community, and they say if you don't like what's happening over there, then you vote for us here, and that's the strategy that they've pursued, and they play on fears and they stoke those fears, and that's why I think we have to do the things that I set out a moment ago in order to try to respond to it. But we've got to recognise there's an issue here, because if we ignore it and we don't talk about it and we don't discuss it with people, then they'll form a conclusion about us as a party that's not interested and doesn't listen, and then the risk increases that they'll go and vote for somebody else. So we've got to take it head on, be straight. Oops.